The firing of a public safety official sows doubts about the future of Vermont's bias-free policing work. Plus, how the federal government shutdown is impacting Vermonters. And after more than a decade of delays and turmoil, the redevelopment of Burlington's downtown mall is nearing completion. All that and more ahead on Vermont This Week.
From the Vermont Public Studio in Winooski, this is Vermont This Week. Made possible in part by the Lintelak Foundation and Milne Travel. Here's moderator Mitch Wertlieb.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Friday, October 3rd. And with us on the panel today, we have Pete Hirschfeld from Vermont Public, Calvin Cutler from WCAX, and Courtney Lamdin from 7 Days. Thank you all so much for being here today. Boy, we have a lot to talk about, some really interesting stories. I want to start with, as we talked about at the top there, the future of Vermont's bias-free policing work being called into question. There was a firing of an official this week at the Department of Public Safety. This is somebody who was hired to, build some trust with communities of color in Vermont, minority communities. Let's hear first from the governor about this firing and then from the employee who was let go.
We still believe in the premise of fair and impartial policing, and we will continue to follow through on that.
I'm at will. They don't owe me a reason legally. And as far as the communities with whom we work are concerned, they do owe them a reason. It would be very weird not to see a link between this and current national politics.
All right, Pete Hirschfeld, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's talk about the gentleman who was fired, what his role was, and what the reason was given, if any, for why he was let go.
Eitan Nasreddin-Longo has been involved in fair and impartial policing for well over a decade, and he started that work as a volunteer, actually. He was training recruits at the police academy on implicit bias, has spent years doing this. About 5 years ago, he was hired by Vermont State Police to serve as co-director of the Fair and Impartial Policing Program, where he won some accolades. In 2022, he was recognized for his outstanding contributions and dedication to fair and impartial policing. Nasreddin-Longo told me that as recently as 3 weeks ago, he was told that they were very satisfied with his work, which it was why it was so surprising to him when last week he was called into a meeting with Public Safety Commissioner Jennifer Morrison and told that he was no longer going to be working at VSP, that his role had been terminated. And Nasreddin-Longo says he was not given an answer for why that was happening.
So no reason apparently given. Calvin Cutler, you've been covering this story as well. Again, a person who seemed to have been doing a very good job here. What about what he was saying there in the clip about it's hard to not see this tied up with national politics?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that, where we were 5-10 years ago when it comes to equity, policing, social justice, accountability for police, we're in a much different spot with the new Trump administration. There's been a lot of changing attitudes and philosophies about immigration, crime, policing, et cetera. And so Nasreddin-Longo sees this as a fundamental shift from the state potentially turning its back on a lot of the work that's been done in the last 5-10 years with the fair and impartial policing policy. To Pete's point, we never got an official reason as to why he was fired. We asked Governor Phil Scott about this, and we heard it in the clip there from the governor, who said, we are still committed to fair and impartial policing. He said that this was a internal HR or human resources issue, and that he wasn't able to comment on it. But he said that this was not, related to national politics. But you ask many in that sphere and that are doing this work on the ground, it's for them, it's tough not to see a connection.
We should be clear, there's no hard evidence at all that there is a link between the anti-DEI rhetoric that we're hearing at the federal level and what happened to Nasreddin-Longo here in Vermont. But he was steeped in these issues in ways that few other people in Vermont are. Up until recently, he was the chair of an advisory panel to the legislature that was examining racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice systems. He had been working with the marginalized communities that this program is designed to build bridges with for many, many years. And that is why, when he was fired, we heard such an outcry from those communities. Two prominent members of Vermont's Fair and Impartial Policing Committee said they were deeply disturbed by this, that you couldn't really hope to find somebody better to fill this role than Nasreddin Longo. So a lot of confusion, and the fact that it came as a surprise, especially, I think, has led people that have been involved in this work for decades in some instances to question whether or not the Scott administration is as committed to it as they previously thought.
But I will also add that the governor, one of the questions we had from him is whether state police plan to refill this role. And he says he believes that Vermont State Police do plan to fill this role. We don't know a timeline, and we don't know who is going to be installed in this co-director role. But to your point, some do see a link here.
But that's sort of key, isn't it? If they're going to refill the position, why fire somebody who, as Pete was saying, had really gotten accolades for the job? Everybody seemed to like this person. There was reaction within the Department of Public Safety itself saying, this is baffling.
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll actually ever get insight into that, to be honest with you, Mitch. And I think that's one of the more puzzling parts about this story. But as you mentioned, I mean, they do plan to fill the role, and who knows, we may never know.
Let's talk about another role that is being filled, Courtney Lamdin, in Burlington, Vermont's largest city. There is a new director of racial equity. Who is this, and what will she be doing? Who is she replacing?
Yeah, so her name's Dr. Kelly Perkins. She comes most recently from a nonprofit in the Upper Valley, but she has a lot of experience working in higher education, in sort of residential life, student life type roles. She obviously has a doctorate. She is replacing, really becoming the most recent director for a department that has had a lot of instability since it was formed in 2019. She is becoming I think it's the third director in 6 years for the department. The previous leaders left for different reasons. I don't think you can necessarily connect those things, but what is true is that this is an issue. Equity inclusion is something that Burlington has committed to, like you all were talking about with the governor. Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanek has said she is committed to continuing this department, even though it came up as a conversation piece in these really tough budget conversations that Burlington was having. Some people questioned if that should be something that Burlington should still do. And Emma said, yes, I want to keep it, and just now found someone to lead the department.
Some other sort of recently breaking news, too. The mayor's going to have to do some other replacing on her staff, right? There are other folks leaving. Who's leaving? Yeah,
we just found this out yesterday. Three key staffers in the mayor's office have all given their notice around the same time. The deputy chief of staff, Joe McGee, is one of them. He was a former Burlington city councilor. He worked on the mayor's campaign last year. He is leaving. Then there's the senior advisor on public safety. That is Ingrid Jonas, who's a retired Vermont State Police commander, long, well-respected career in law enforcement, who was brought in to streamline some of the city's kind of fractured responses to public safety. And then the last one is the Special Assistant to End Homelessness. It's a very weighty title to have on your shoulders, but that's Sarah Russell. And the city said she got a job with another nonprofit. But obviously, particularly for Ingrid and Sarah, those two women are in charge of handling some of the most pressing issues that we're seeing in Burlington right now, community safety and homelessness. And so we've heard from the city that Ingrid's position won't be refilled. It was always going to be a temporary thing, but I think it's ending perhaps sooner than people expected. And they will fill Sarah Russell's position. So we'll just have to wait and see. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of busy talk happening there in Burlington for sure. Let's talk about the other big story that's happening. It's affecting Vermont, but it's affecting the entire nation. As we're talking right now, at the time of this taping, the federal government is shut down. This could change by the time you're actually watching this. We just don't know. Events move so quickly with this. But at the moment we're talking, there is a federal government shutdown. First one since 2018. The Democrats are digging their heels in on this. They're not passing the continuing resolution. Let's hear what Senator Bernie Sanders has had to say about why the Democrats have this position.
I don't want to shock the people in Vermont, but sometimes, occasionally, Trump lies. The law is very clear. Undocumented people cannot get Medicaid, cannot get Medicare, do not have access to the ACA. The people who are going to be hurt are 45,000 people in the state of Vermont. They're going to lose their health insurance. They're not undocumented. 31,000 Vermonters are going to see their premiums double. Now, that's what these guys don't want to talk about.
Calvin Cutler, for those who may just be sort of like dropping in from space and hearing that, what is Bernie Sanders talking about? Why is health care tied up with this federal government shutdown?
Yeah, I mean, there's a continuing resolution, a budget package that passed through the House. It's now in the Senate. It does not include a extension of Affordable Care Act subsidies, which have really been keeping costs down for many Americans, Vermonters, and has been making it more accessible to have health insurance. There is no extension of that right now, and that's set to expire at the end of the year. Democrats, who are in the minority and don't control any chambers in the Congress, are using this as really the main wedge, the main bargaining chip that they have to try to force Republicans to have concessions. But it's a double-edged sword here in terms of the political calculus that Democrats are making. It's a little bit of a gamble, I think it's fair to say. I don't want to get too much into the weeds with the DC politics of all of this, but this potentially could have a real impact on Vermonters and healthcare if these subsidies are not refilled and extended. And it comes, we've talked so much on this show about the challenges that Vermont's healthcare system, the solvency of insurance companies, the affordability, access. It's a really tough time for Vermonters accessing healthcare.
Obviously, it's a political gamble. Anytime you're talking about a government shutdown, the question is who's going to take blame. The Democrats, however, at this exact moment, don't have a whole lot to lose, right? We have seen them underwater in numerous national polls. I saw one recently that showed a 63% disapproval rate for congressional Democrats. So what they have been doing has not been resonating with the electorate at large.
The messaging.
The messaging. They've also been without a leverage point for basically the last 8 months, right? Now they have one. It seems pretty clear based on conversations with members of the delegation that they felt like we have to do something different. Here's our opportunity to do that. Bernie Sanders is one of the people leading this charge right now. That wing of the party, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have been pushing for a more aggressive, assertive posture from Democrats. And we really see Sanders as one of the people in Congress who is very much out front on this.
Yeah, can I just ask this, though, because I can remember back when, in Trump's first term, there was a concerted effort by Republicans to repeal the Affordable Care Act. There was a large public response to that. They did not want it repealed. So why then would this not be perhaps a winning issue for Democrats to plant their flag?
That's a great question. I asked Congresswoman Becca Balint that this morning, and basically, she said that at the end of the day, there's no trust in Congress right now, and they are not able to work with Republicans. I think there's two ways that you can, from Democrats' perspective, that you can take this. The way that they are choosing is, let's go with the shutdown and, try to use that as leverage, as a negotiating chip. Or, the alternative being, okay, let's let these subsidies expire and let's, have Americans feel the pain of having increased healthcare costs, and then take that to the voters, take that to and use that against Republicans in the midterms or in the next presidential election. That's not the tact that we're seeing right now. There is a political calculus that is being made to extend this shutdown. We'll see how long it goes. The last shutdown that we had, it was in 2018, 2019. That was 35 days. That had a pretty prolific impact on Americans. We can talk a little bit about sort of the brass tacks of what it means here in Vermont.
Well, you just anticipated my next question, because I do want to know, what effect is this going to have on federal workers here or the state at large?
I talked to the Public Assets Institute that did some polling right before the DOGE cuts back in the spring. They said that there's about 6,600 federal workers. I mean, these are everybody from the TSA, the VA, Army National Guard, USDA, Small Business Administration, just a galaxy of government agencies. Because of where Vermont sits, and we're close to the border, and we have Homeland Security and the military, we don't know exactly how many, but it's fair to say most of our federal workers will stay on the job, some with pay, some without pay, without pay, that is. But there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to be going, without pay, and the forward-facing services to Vermonters, the SBA, the USDA, those are going to be paused. And it's one of these things. The longer the shutdown lingers, the more Vermonters will feel it.
There are earmarks that could be at risk for Vermont. Potentially tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. And there are social safety net programs, WIC, SNAP. Those aren't going to be cut off yet. But if this goes on for more than 4 or 5 weeks, there is the potential that we see an interruption in critical life-preserving benefits that people rely on. And then there's also the broader economic issue, right? There are high-ranking officials in the Scott administration, there are economists I've spoken to that say Vermont's economy is in a very tenuous spot right now. We heard economists for the legislature and the administration just a couple months ago talk about how uncertain things are and how susceptible the state economy is to unexpected things happening. And so that's another concern, that the macroeconomics of this could become really bad really quickly if it lingers too long.
We've talked about our economy from the immigration perspective of, raids on dairy farms, and I think last week in Hardwick there was one on a construction site and people were detained. So there's the labor side of this, but also just looking at how many Vermont companies have contracts with the federal government. During the shutdown, they will not be paid. I was talking with the Chamber of Commerce. There's $359 million in government contracts to manufacturers, high-tech, chip makers, et cetera, that right now are not going forward. And the longer that goes on, that could affect employees of those specific companies. And that's cash flow that isn't moving through the economy. So it's just, there's a lot of ripple effects to a shutdown here. And that makes, the pressure, especially in the Senate, even more. It's
an unbelievably dangerous game of chicken is what it sounds like at this point, and we're just going to have to see where this goes. I appreciate the updates on both of you on those stories. Courtney Lamdin, I want to circle back to you on a Burlington story that's really a big deal given how long this took. The Pit, as it has been not so affectionately known, is kind of no more. We're talking about this huge redevelopment project in downtown Burlington. The first phase of it is now up and running. What can you tell us about that, and what is still left to be done?
Yeah, so absolutely. This is the development that was for years known as City Place. I will have a hard time remembering now to call it Burlington Square. Yes. So they've renamed it, maybe to kind of clear the air. I don't know. It's like a new beginning for them. But this project has gone through lawsuits, ownership changes, public opposition, zoning, all of this stuff. And finally, this month, the first of 2 towers in this on this lot, which is right in the center of downtown, opened. And this tower in particular has 53 apartments in it. And a very swanky, if I might say, hotel. It's an AC Marriott, feels very metropolitan. And, the question, now that it's open, is who can afford to live there? Will people want to live downtown in a place that's kind of struggling with many social issues? I got some data when I was reporting on this to compare the rents at this new tower to others in Chittenden County. So I found that most newly built 2 bedrooms are going for between $2,300 and $2,800 per month. There are outliers. I mean, that alone sounds expensive. It's higher than my mortgage for sure. But there are outliers for complexes that have like really great views or other amenities. And Burlington Square is for sure one of those. 2 bedrooms there range from $3,650 to $6,800 a month. The latter, yeah. Wow. Eye-popping numbers. So the latter is for a unit on the kind of rooftop. So you do get like near panoramic or just very incredible views. And that's what they're asking. When I talked to them last, they hadn't had too many people sign up yet. It's been a couple weeks. They are going to start a new marketing push. But that's what it's looking like.
Not to worry, though, because there are supposed to be some affordable housing units attached to this project, too, right? Those are up and running, aren't they?
No. Yes. So yes, you're alluding to an ordinance in Burlington that requires developers of buildings of a certain size to build a percentage of what they call inclusionary units or affordable units. It's tied to people's income and all of that. The developers made a deal with the city to include all of those units in the second tower. that is not yet built. Right now, it is just a steel frame. And the last I checked, they don't have financing for the building. I think that was supposed to come through later this month.
You mean financing for finishing that steel
for that tower? Yes. So you can imagine that city officials might be feeling a little queasy about the likelihood of these opening. When I spoke to the developers, they said, we have to do it, we will do it. We just might need a little bit more time. The city's deadline, I think they are asking for like 6 more months from whatever their deadline is. They want to extend it into like fall next year, I think it was.
But time was the issue with the first phase of the project, right? It just kept taking so long.
It did keep taking so long. It did. And I think, I think we'll just have to see. Like, this is, like I said, a new project team. These are local guys. And what one of them said to me, Dave Farrington, is like, if we don't do this, like, we won't survive. Like, our reputation won't survive in this town. So it is, not only do they have to do it, I think they do want to. It's just a matter of when.
Wow.
It's tough to look under the hood because we don't know the finances, we don't know, the math behind this. But a lot of developers that I talked to, like on the statewide level, just recently there was a ribbon cutting at an affordable housing development down in on Route 7 down in Shelburne. Labor, lumber, construction materials, inflation. It's a very tough time to be building. And so, I mean, it makes sense. Again, we don't know the math of this, but it's understandable that, building, and especially a big building like this, there potentially could be delays here.
And
but
that Shelburne project, 55 units, I believe,
Yep.
At a cost of over $50 million. Or maybe it was 90 units, I don't know.
It was 94.
94. Point is, an affordable housing complex where the average per unit cost at scale was over $500,000. So building affordable housing is not affordable, as it turns out, and inevitably somebody is going to be subsidizing the cost of that construction in order for somebody of modest means to be able to live there.
Yeah, it's amazing that the other factors that always contribute to this, there's the cost of materials, tariffs I'm sure play into this too.
Bingo.
Right? I mean, it's just, these are not easy things. And Courtney, to your point, you were mentioning how, who's going to be able to afford those really expensive apartments there? Who's going to want to live necessarily in downtown Burlington? That brings us to the issue of the Overdose Prevention Center, which Burlington has the money for. They've been talking about this for a while, a place where people can actually use illegal drugs under supervision so that they don't overdose and die. That is the goal, right? But where is this going to be? Is it going to be, what is the update on that situation?
Yeah, so the legislature eventually passed a bill. It survived the governor's veto and allocated $2.2 million to the city of Burlington to operate a 2-year pilot project to have this overdose prevention center somewhere. So now that they have the money, that is the question. Where is it going to go? And I think the debate will really be, is it going to go downtown or not? And I think that is what people want to know. There's arguments for that, right? It's walkable. The people who are already using in public spaces is predominantly downtown, so they want it to be in a place where the intended audience can access it. There's public transportation. There are other social services that are around there. But also, local businesses in Burlington have been saying for years now that they can't really sustain any more of the kind of disorder that's downtown. Now, whether the OPC, as they call it, will bring more of that downtown is an open question, obviously. We don't know. It's untested here. There are studies across the country, or across the world, where other centers operate that say more crime doesn't come to these areas. One of them was actually written by the former police chief in Burlington, Brandon Del Pozo. He's now a researcher on this thing. But I think because it's the unknown, right? People don't know what to do with it.
And the optics too, right?
Yeah.
Because something could be working, but if you see people using it, there's a perception problem there.
There is. And I think the argument that the proponents have made is that people are using now in City Hall Park, in front of Calvin's apartment in Burlington, in Old North End. The idea is to give them a place to go so that the perception of Burlington could improve, right? Like, if these folks are not out on the street, maybe that would be a good thing. And I guess the organizers say the people behind it is a nonprofit in Burlington that will operate it, says that they hope the center will include other amenities. So, like, kind of maybe like a place for people to kind of just hang out after they consume drugs. There will be access to recovery services. So the idea isn't for it to just be a place to use and then spill back out onto the streets.
I see.
But again, untested.
And go ahead, Calvin.
Briefly, also, how would this fly in the Trump administration? That's the other kind of the federal piece of this. Will this even get off the ground? I don't know.
Yeah, and is there a date for this, by the way? Is there any kind of set date for when they want to have this set up? Or anything?
No. Emma had said when the legislation passed that she hoped to open it this year, but she's now realizing that it's going to take much longer for that to happen and is not committing to a new date.
And the mayor's challenges just got more challenging in that sense because of losing some of those officials that we talked about earlier.
Right. Though I will say she still does maintain a special assistant for the Overdose Prevention Center.
She does, okay.
So there is that, but all of the people are supposed to be working together toward the goal.
And she's committed to it.
She is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have to see where that one goes. Incredible stuff going on all around. Oh, by the way, if you're thinking of streaking in Burlington anytime soon, don't do it because the city has now passed an ordinance banning nudity, right?
They have.
Okay, I got to change my plans for this weekend. I did want to finish on this news that Vermont has set a new record for the largest state pumpkin ever grown, 1,814 pounds. Go ahead and carve that for Halloween. I think you can come up with something pretty great there. I would go with Jabba the Hutt. I don't know about any of you folks. We're going to have to leave it there for today. I want to thank everyone for watching, and thanks to our panel. Pete Hirschfeld from Vermont Public, Calvin Cutler from WCAX, and Courtney Lamdin from 7 Days. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you'll join us next week as well for Vermont This Week. In the meantime, have a great week. Thanks.